God of the universe, maker of the stars, who am I that you would know my name, that the maker of the world cares for me.
Welcome to Life on Purpose with Daniel Clayton and myself, Mike Clayton.
That's him.
Yeah, there you go. We got that down. Okay, it's a wrap. We can go home now. No, we got to go on with the program, at least for 29 minutes and 45 seconds. We've gone through 5 questions of life, and but then there's times in your life that you're just kind of wondering, wait a minute, how in the world did I get here? And I want to go to the scriptures, Daniel, and read about a guy that's what happened to him. His name's Jacob. And we know that he was fleeing from his brother. That relationship is going downhill pretty fast. He goes to a place which is going to be called the House of God, Beit El. And he stands up there, and he has kind of the audacity, I think, in this one. It's the translation says, if God, but I think I'm going to read it like this, when God. So this is what is going through Jacob's mind. He says, when God will be with me and will guard me on this road that I am traveling, bring me give me bread to eat and clothes to wear, so that I will return to my father's house in peace, then he will be my God. It's like we have the God of Abraham, Isaac, and now there's Jacob out here. And this is almost like God could have been the God of Abraham and Isaac and not the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because Jacob kind of puts God to the test here and says, okay, I've heard of you through my grandfather, through my father, but now let's me and you deal with our relationship one-on-one. And this is something that I call the crisis of faith. What do you think about that?
Well, it's interesting. I can't remember where it is, but it says specifically in the scriptures, you are not to put the Lord your God to the test. Mm-hmm. And yet we see several times how, Jacob kind of putting God to the test here. We see, I think it's Gideon later on, kind of putting God to the test with the fleece and the dew. And so, though it says you are not to put the Lord your God to the test, we see these moments in scripture where people put him to the test, and God actually honors it, and he ends up doing it. And so, why? Why does that happen? And it's almost like every situation is unique, and God knows each person and exactly what they need. So this crisis of faith, this moment of where am I, and how are you? It's a moment of, are you real, God? Mm-hmm. That's what it is. Mm-hmm. And I had one of those moments, and I think probably everyone has had one of those moments. I've had many of them, actually. Yeah. But ours came roughly almost
12 years
13,
ago. Almost 13
years ago in 2010. Yeah. Our house got wrecked by a tornado. I don't know, maybe some of the listeners and viewers here were with us through that process. But just absolutely, Ep4, Ep5 tornado came directly over the top of our house, totaled all the outbuildings. The rain afterward totaled the house and just completely rearranged our lives entirely. Mm-hmm. And I remember going into, we had a metal shipping container. That was our storm shelter. It was strapped to the ground. It was nestled kind of in the trees, guarded from the wind a little bit. And that was our tornado shelter. So we went out there, and I later, in a creative writing class, described that moment using the aspect of a time machine. Yeah. Because when we went in and when we came out was 2 totally different worlds. Mm-hmm. Everything was, and I remember walking out of that tornado shelter and thinking, one of my first thoughts was, why would God let this happen to us? Yeah. You don't have to experience much for that thought to just come to you. It's just like this human nature to question and to doubt and whatever. It's really annoying, actually.
That's true.
But there we are, and that's the first question that enters my mind. And, it wasn't until later in life that I realized that God is not afraid of our questions. and he's not afraid of our moments of weakness. He's pretty secure. You know, the creator of the universe, he's pretty sure of himself and who he is and what he can do. And so us asking him a question, it doesn't really affect him much. He's just okay with it. I mean, if you have read any psalm at all, you know that David was a guy who was blunt and honest with God about how he felt, about what he was going through. And I believe that honesty, that brutal, raw honesty, was one of the reasons that David specifically is called a man after God's own heart. But that crisis of faith moment, that are you real, God? You know, I was 15 at the time, so, you know, really just kind of coming into my own, realizing, you know, coming into life. And so we went through it. We started kind of putting our lives back together. We lived in trailers, you know, travel trailers for about 5 months, I think. Something like that. So I had a lot of time by myself in a travel trailer. We had separate ones. And so I just spent a lot of that time praying and, you know, playing my guitar. And that was when I was asking God, like, I asked him, do you hear me? Do you hear my prayers? Like, are you there at the other end of this call? Or am I just, you know, kind of hearing the line buzzing on the other side? And it ended up being some of the most special moments of our entire lives, you know, not just me, but our whole family. And we'll get into this, you know, how the crisis of faith is something that sculpts you. Yeah. But, you know, so there I was not questioning God, but in one way I was questioning God. You know, I was trying to figure out for myself, for me, who is God and does he hear me? And so you fast forward a few months to Sukkot, and we are at Sportsman's Lake in Oklahoma, and Barry Phillips came to speak. And he was playing this guitar that he had brought, this electric Parker blonde wood guitar, just gorgeous thing.
Gorgeous.
Really, really
so
great guitar.
I don't play guitars, but this is a beautiful guitar.
It was really nice. And so he's up there teaching one day. He had been playing it throughout the week while he was there. And at the end, he's got this guitar in his hands and he's teaching, he's talking. And he starts talking about the story of this guitar. You know, I won't go into the whole history, but it was given to him. And then he worked at a music store and they were trying to sell this guitar at the store. You know, weeks go by, however long, this guitar isn't selling. It should be. Guitars like it are selling. This one's not. And so he's out on his porch one day and he's just praying and about all sorts of things. And he's asking the Father about this guitar. Like, why hasn't this guitar sold yet? And he heard in that moment the Father say to him, that guitar has not sold because it belongs to Daniel. And he's telling this story in front of everyone, in front of me. And I'm pretty sure you could have watched my jaw drop.
I did.
You did.
Good.
And so
I also watched your eyes start leaking.
Yes, indeed, lots. And so on the surface, that was him hearing from God to give me a guitar. But what people didn't know is that I was praying, God, do you hear me? Yeah. And here is a man who heard from God my name. What God was saying is, I know your name, I heard you, and here's the proof.
Yeah. And so this crisis of faith, I mean, I guess we could talk to, and maybe we'll do this, we'll talk to Holyssa about this, of the word test there, because there's one part of, you know, testing him in a negative manner, of kind of like, you know, well, I know what your word says, but I'm going to do this anyway. It's a bit of a blatant, arrogant, in your face kind of thing. But then there's what you're talking about is, are you really real? Okay, I grew up, grandmother that was a very godly woman, had so many tragedies in her life. In fact, when we moved to Florida, I took over pastoring a church there. The whole county, everybody knew my grandmother. And when I would meet them, they'd, you know, how did you move here to this county? I said, well, I'm, you know, do you know, and I gave her name, and they'd say, oh, you're her grandson. Yes. And so I had instant notoriety. And they'd always look at me and say, you know, Miss Loney went through more tragedy in life than anybody I've ever known, but she always kept her faith in God. And so I understand the concept of being raised by someone that has a legacy of godliness. But there came a time in which he had to be my God. You know, it's this adage that says God doesn't have grandchildren. He has sons and daughters. And this is something that, you know, we must pass on. In fact, you know that in your life, I was actually kind of intentional in this. Not the tornado, but intentional. And that I believe for parents, if I have any parents that are watching or grandparents that are watching, we need to be intentional about putting our young people, our children, our grandchildren into that crisis of faith. You know, not that we are putting them in any kind of danger, but it's like, you know, they come to you with a question about God, about Scripture. Don't be so fast, so quick to just give the answer, but to say, well, you know, have you prayed about this? Have you read the Scripture? Or, you know, here's a set of verses. It's like when I have someone come to me, as I have had numerous times at you know, young adult meetings we've done, and they say, you know, how do I know God's will for my life? I will normally give them, you know, Proverbs 18:16 or various other scriptures and say, you know, you go, you pray about this, and here's my phone number. Give me a call. Because somehow, somewhere along the way, the disconnect has to come from them relying on my revelation, my relationship, and it has to become their revelation and their relationship. I guess that brings us to another place of, you know, how are we studying Scripture for each of us? Is it to become smarter than our relatives? You know, I want to know this verse and what this word means in Hebrew or Greek or whatever, or am I reading it, you know, just because out of duty or some kind of responsibility, or am I reading this book to have an encounter with the Almighty, an encounter with the one that created me? And if that's the purpose, then I become excited about what I'm reading. I become excited about the revelation. And maybe that excitement is going to go over into someone else. And that may be me setting them up for kind of a crisis of faith in their own lives. So that they're, well, let's just go ahead and use the words here, owning it. Mm-hmm. And that's the purpose. That's really what we're talking about this week, is owning our faith for ourselves. You got anything to add to the crisis of faith, or you want to just move on?
No, yeah, I'd like to use a quick example, you know, just to expound a little bit about what you say about, you know, putting them into situations. Mm-hmm. So to give an example, let's use weightlifting as an example. So something neither of us really do, but, you know, I've been around enough people. I did a little bit in the past. You know, if you know, have a goal to, you know, lift, you know, let's just say 300 pounds on a deadlift, then you don't start with 300 pounds. Mm-hmm. And here's the thing, you shouldn't start doing it on your own, because there's a technique to it. Mm-hmm. And if you start too much too fast, then you're going to hurt yourself. And so, you know, essentially there's a process of teaching someone how to, but you know what? That person still has to put in the work, mm-hmm. and they're still tearing their muscles, mm-hmm. and building them back up, tearing them up and building them back up. And so there's just this process of teaching someone the right way to do something and letting them do it their own. So it's not your strength that's being built up when they're, you know, lifting and exercising or whatever. It's their strength, mm-hmm. but you're teaching them. And so, you know, you could say the same thing about like riding a bike or whatever.
Yeah.
The point is, you know, you cultivate these moments of learning in increments that as a parent, you know they can handle this at this point. Mm-hmm. You know they can handle a little more in a couple years and a little more. And so it's just this idea of, you don't just kick them to the curb to where they're going to go straight for the 300-pounder and just break their back. You know, it's teaching them, you know, a little bit at a time, and then just stepping back to where it's them making the accomplishments, them doing the work, but you're just it's a safe environment. And so that's just kind of one example of putting them in a situation.
I was thinking about you use the thing of I'm very famous of throwing you in the deep end of the pool.
Yes.
But the truth is that I only throw you in I throw you in a place, or I try to do this, of throwing you in a place that makes you uncomfortable, but yet I know you can handle it.
Yeah, I was actually talking to someone about that very recently. This person was saying that their dad, they taught them how to swim in the shallow end, but literally threw them in the deep end of the pool. But it wasn't until the father knew that they could handle it, they could do it. The father had watched them, had taught them, knew that they had everything at their disposal to be able to be successful at it. But also knew that maybe there was a little bit of fear involved, like the deep end was a scary thing. But a good parent will know when to do something maybe a little dramatic to help overcome the fear.
Yeah.
Because the fear will always hold someone back.
Yeah, true. And so let's go to this statement of owning it. This is something that came out, and I hope that people don't mind the fact that we use a lot of our own examples of life. But life on purpose. I mean, it's about life. And so, how do we learn life? We learn it by
teaching
example.
about someone else's.
You use your own. Okay, and a person with an experience is never at the mercy of a person with an argument. So
stop right there.
Oh,
don't skim over that one, because that's a big one.
Okay.
And especially when it comes to owning it, like that statement, a person with experience is not at the mercy of someone with an argument. If you have had an experience that has led to obedience with the living God, you are not at the mercy of an atheist that comes and says, oh yeah, this is just a book.
So you give the guitar example to somebody that doesn't believe in God, what are they going to do? Well, you just made that up, or that's coincidence. Really?
Yeah.
Come on. So this owning it, when the God of Abraham and Isaac became the God of Jacob, through the whole Laban thing and the Esau thing and the veils and the wives and all this kind of stuff all this thing that he was going through, he came back, and it's now the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So he had to own his relationship with his Creator. Again, you growing up in this walk. You were going through the motions of it, doing I felt a pretty good job of going through those motions, but then you started working at a camp that was it was a Christian camp.
Christian camp, yeah.
And the people loved God. I mean, no doubt. I met them. They were amazing. They had their interpretation of the word and everything. And you came back from that summer, and it's like, oh, what about this? And what about this? And I said, it's time for you to own it. And your statement was, well, explain that to me. There comes a time with Scripture, with our experience, with our relationship with the Almighty, that it has to be ours. I have to come to the place of I will guard, observe, however you want to put the words in there, the Shabbat, because it's my Shabbat. It's not somebody else's Shabbat. I wear tzitzit on my the fringes because it's part of me. So the Scripture and the relationship has become my identity, not just someone else's identity. It brings me to a statement that I'll turn over to you here. That in this one, don't jump too fast when I say this, but I do not believe that the Creator is really that concerned about about our behavior. It's like, wait a minute, I'm in the Torah, and calm, just a moment. He's concerned about our identity, because our identity will drive our behavior. The verse that's kind of tweaked the translation is, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. So the person you see yourself as is the person that will drive the behavior and the things that you do. So when I see myself as a child of God, and then I see these scriptures as written, not just to Bill or to Eddie or to Holyssa or to Daniel or whoever, not this Daniel, another Daniel, or well, that Daniel too. But I see these scriptures as written to me personally, then that's driving my behavior. What you got?
Yeah, so growing up, I don't remember a time before Torah really. I have two non-Torah memories. One is I have just this little image of like this little Christmas tree in the window, and then I have a memory of eating lobster, and I was like, all I remember is that it was really, really difficult to eat, and I was like, this is not worth it. This is so much work to eat this thing. But those are the only two non-Torah memories I have. And so, I grew up with the Torah, and, it was what I knew, and I loved it. I was never upset that my friends over here were doing Christmas and I was doing Hanukkah. I was never upset that they were doing Easter and I'm doing Passover. Like that, it never really crossed my mind. And so, but it wasn't until, those teenage years, the time of the camp, this kind of thing that, I was challenged on it, and not challenged in a way of like, you shouldn't believe that because it's dumb and, you don't have to, not that kind of thing, but just like people asking genuinely, like, why do you do this?
Yeah, they're respectful in their questioning. Yeah.
Yes, and here's the thing. Because if someone's not respectful in their questioning, they don't want to talk to you, just so you know. They just want to talk at you. Here's the answer, I think, is 1 Peter chapter 3. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with this verse, or these verses. For who will hurt you if you become zealots for what is good? But even if you do suffer for being righteous, you are blessed. Moreover, don't fear what they fear or be disturbed, but treat the Messiah as holy, as Lord in your hearts, while remaining always ready to give a reasoned answer to anyone who asks you to explain the hope you have in you. And I'll stop there. Now, this is also translated like, just always be ready to give a defense, a reason for the hope that's inside of you. Here's what it doesn't say. It doesn't say to be ready to give a reasoned explanation for the theology that you have in you. It's the hope in you. And so essentially what I came to is that the Messiah, the Torah, they are my life. These are things that I have found to be my own, and now no one can take them away from me. We always talk about, hold your ideas just lightly enough to where the Father can remove them and kind of tweak them a little bit, but not so loose that they just fly away at the first sign of adversity. So, with that in mind, people are not going to take the Messiah from me. They're not going to take the Torah from me because I have found my reasoned answer for the hope that I have in me, and for the reasons that I think that Messiah and the Torah are to be followed, are to be lived out. And I had to come to a place of owning that by having to give explanations for it. And, as people have asked questions, it's only helped me grow in my reason and my explanations because, you end up thinking about it more. You end up asking yourself, why do I do that? Because as a teenager, you don't know why you do the stuff that you do. You just do it,
Yeah, questioning is not a bad thing. For me, I said to someone just this morning, last night, my whole life has been about asking why. And, I still do this. I did this growing up. I do this now, is that if you say, do this, my answer is going to be why. Now, I don't do that with God as much, okay? I'm talking about humans. Somebody says, go do this. I'm going to be like, well, why should I do this? If you can give me an answer, then I'm all in. You don't have to ask me twice. You don't have to check up on me. It's going to be done. But if it's just a random thing that there's really no purpose in doing this, I'm probably not your person to be asking about that. Regarding this, the giving an account of not the theology. So another verse that says, I know in whom I have believed. It does not say I know in what I've believed, because the what comes out of the whom. Because the what is about what we learn about a person as we walk with them in relationship. This goes to marriage, this goes to our children, this goes to all the relationships that we have in our lives. But then it means that I'm intentional. I know we use that word a lot too, but I'm intentional in deepening my relationships, period, plural, period. I don't like flippant relationships. I tell this story, and I'm actually going to do this a message at River of Life, of driving around. I broke down a few years ago and joined the social media crowd, and people thought it was somebody scamming, because when I'm sending them an invite, they're like, "This could not be Mike Clayton,
for sure.
really. It's got to be somebody else." But it really was me. But before that, we were in Oklahoma, and I was driving around up in Seminole, going to Lowe's, to Shawnee. I was going to Lowe's or something, or coming back. And I saw a car wash, and it said, friend us on Facebook. And I thought, if you have a car wash as a friend, we really need to talk about your social dysfunction here, because it's very difficult for me to have a long-lasting or deep relationship with a car wash.
Your loss.
Yeah, I know. But I know that's silly. I got that. But shouldn't that be kind of how we treat all of our relationships? That we're intentional and serious about them?
And, I feel like this, maybe this is just a humanity thing. I don't know if it's a messianic thing or a humanity thing. It could be both. But, it is possible to over-question things, for sure. There's
never done that.
Never. But, there's something to be said about inherited wisdom. You don't have to question every single thing. You don't have to question why you dump out the milk after it smells bad. You just, unless you're like a biologist and you're just interested in that kind of thing. You don't have to question everything. However, I have found that a lot of the times we don't know why we do the things. If someone asked you, or me or whatever, why do you, if you do this, why do you light 2 candles on Shabbat?
Yeah.
Why do you wear tzitzit? Why do you put on a talit when you pray on Shabbat? Why do you do this? Why do you, not just the big things, but the little things? Why do you do hand washing? Why don't you do hand washing? If you don't know why you're doing something, then why are you doing it? To some extent, and that's what I mean, the over-questioning. I think there's an area of fake it till you make it, because if you can read in the scriptures and it says, where's tzitzit? Then you do it because you love God and you want to obey Him. And then that obedience produces understanding. There's an area for that. But as far as let's just say the non-commanded things, it's not commanded to light candles on Shabbat. So if you do that, that's wonderful. It can be a wonderful part of your Friday nights. But if you don't understand why, then maybe know why. Because at the end of the day, it's about Yeshua. And if Yeshua is not incorporated, and if you can't see Him, and if you haven't taken the time to intentionally see Him in everything you do, then it's just a ketubah. Anybody can have a ketubah. Like any old Joe Schmo can go write a contract out, but if there's no 2 parties that is joined, that the covenant, the ketubah is joining, then it's just a document. If the ketubah does not produce the covenant between you and Yeshua is not the part of everything, then it's just a document.
And so, and to quote Yeshua, He says, when you've seen me, you've seen the Father. So when we enter into this deeper relationship with our Messiah, we're entering into a deeper relationship with the Father. I know that goes into other programming or things for other teachers to do. But the thought of owning it, making it your own, and we're going to actually talk about in our next episode about how do we make these things our own. And maybe your walk, your walk doesn't look exactly like my walk. And and I can't get offended at that. I need to be able to say, he's walking it out different because it's a different generation. Yes, there's a different ways of looking at things. And so, but the heart of the issue, the heart of the matter is we're both walking toward him, walking toward that hope, walking toward that future, walking toward this idea that we have of living our life on purpose toward him. 7 seconds.
We'll be back, I guess, but that's the best I got. You gave me 7 seconds. We'll see you next time.
We're done.
Who am I that you would know my name? That the maker of